Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mixed Martial Arts, your #1 channel for comic books and mixed martial arts related content. We'll be reviewing issue 8 of The Amazing Spider-Man in today's video. But if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, then go check out my review of that movie. In that video, I also summarize the story and give my thoughts on what we can expect in the future MCU Spider-Man movies. For this video, we'll be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man #8, which features the first appearance of the Living Brain and a guest appearance by the Human Torch, which is always fun because the relationship between Spider-Man and the Human Torch is great. We're also finally going to see Peter get into a real fight with Flash Thompson. There's a lot of cool scenes in this issue, so let's get started by getting into the comic. The issue opens with Spider-Man trying to protect some kids from the Living Brain. But what is the Living Brain, and why is it terrorizing these people? Let's get into the story to find out. The story begins with two people rolling the Living Brain machine into Peter Parker's high school classroom. Flash makes fun of the Living Brain, and Peter explains to Flash that this machine is one of the greatest scientific innovations of the age. Peter and Flash get into it right away as Flash shoves Peter and his glasses break. They're about to fight in the classroom, but Liz Allen gets in between them and breaks it up. Peter has just about had enough of Flash's bullying. Then Mr. Petty, one of the contributors to the creation of the Living Brain, introduces the machine to the class. He explains that the brain has a ball on each leg that allows it to move, and arms that make it function similar to a human. It's also the smartest machine on the planet, more intelligent than any human or computer. Mr. Petty requests the assistance of a student, and the teacher selects Peter to help since he's at the top of the class. As Peter is working on the Living Brain, Flash continues making fun of him. But at the same time, the two men who rolled the Living Brain into the class are planning to steal the machine so they can use its intelligence to make money. Meanwhile, the teacher instructs the class to ask the Living Brain a question, and the class settles on asking what Spider-Man's real identity is. This puts Peter in a real tough situation, because he needs to ask the Living Brain this question and present the answer to the class. Peter is extremely nervous that the Living Brain might actually figure out that he is Spider-Man, and then Peter would need to present this answer to the class. Peter inputs the question and receives an answer, but he gets a lucky break for once because the response comes out in computer language. So Peter is tasked with translating it overnight and providing his class with the answer the next day at school. This gives him some time to think of a plan. But then Flash tries to steal the paper away from Peter. He is such a big fan of Spider-Man that he doesn't trust Peter with decoding the answer accurately. So the two of them start arguing again just as the teacher breaks them up and suggests that they settle their differences in a boxing match. We skip forward now to the end of class, and Peter is preparing to box Flash Thompson in front of the whole class. It's a great scene, and the entire class is in support of Flash Thompson, clearly expecting him to win. When the fight starts, Peter's spider sense allows him to dodge every punch with ease, but he moves so fast that the class thinks he's just running away from Flash. Peter even mentions that to him, Flash appears to be moving in slow motion. And so for all you movie fans, that is where the concept for this classic scene comes from. Getting back into the comic though, Peter throws a single punch at Flash that sends him flying through the ropes and out of the ring. Peter can't believe what he's done and becomes extremely concerned for Flash. But Flash plays it off and pretends like it was nothing, just a lucky shot. He hops back in the ring for more just as the two men from earlier follow through with their plan and begin stealing the Living Brain. But they get caught by someone in the school, so one of the crooks knocks him out as the other crook bumps into the brain's control panel by mistake. This makes the Living Brain malfunction and start thinking independently. It sends the brain on a rampage and it starts terrorizing everyone in the school. Meanwhile, Peter and Flash are still fighting in the gym, and Peter decides he's going to end the fight by throwing a punch without any power. He's simply going to flick his wrist instead of putting his power into the punch. Yet just before he lands the strike, someone yells out in fear that the Living Brain is out of control. Flash turns his head to listen just as Peter lands his punch, and Flash gets knocked out cold. So Peter finally gets some revenge on Flash, but the entire class thinks that the knockout was unfair because Flash turned his head. Peter finally defeats his bully, and he doesn't get any respect for it. But Peter doesn't care. He immediately picks Flash up and carries him down to the locker room to recover. Then Peter changes into his Spider-Man suit and jumps into action. He holds the Living Brain off by jumping on its back while the students that are in the Living Brain's path of destruction run away to safety. But the brain is too fast and it knocks Spider-Man off its back immediately. Spider-Man helps more students escape from the school and spins some webs to try and hold the Living Brain off for a while. But the brain is too strong and it breaks through his webs with ease. Spider-Man can't believe the difficulties posed by this new threat that is the Living Brain, and he focuses on just staying out of the brain's reach. But the brain is so advanced that he can change his speed and catch up to the retreating Spider-Man. Spider-Man just continues trying to evade the brain's attacks until he can come up with a better strategy. And then Spidey runs into more students who he protects by breaking open a door and providing an exit for the kids to leave the school. But now Spider-Man has lost the brain, so he searches around, and the brain surprises Spider-Man by knocking a door off its hinges that traps Spider-Man under it. But the Living Brain makes its first mistake by assuming Spider-Man is defeated. Of course, Spider-Man won't be beat so easily. He plans on taking the Living Brain by surprise in their next encounter. But first, he hears the two thieves run by him as they discuss the incident where they messed with the brain's control panel. Now that Spider-Man understands he needs to reset the machine's controls, he chases down the brain again, but the computer was expecting this, and it throws Spider-Man straight at a wall. He maintains a distance from the brain by staying on the ceiling, but the brain continues its relentless attack by swinging a door at Spider-Man. Spider-Man tries to think of a way to reach the Living Brain's controls, just as the brain targets a new pair of students. Spider-Man races back into action to protect the students by hopping on the brain's back. Spidey finally gets a hold of the control panel and restarts the machine's controls. But the Living Brain has already gained too much momentum before its controls are restarted, and it's heading straight for the stairs, with Spider-Man stuck in its arms. Spider-Man shoots a single web line that holds himself and the Living Brain in the air and sends them flying back into the school where they land safely. The Living Brain is back to being a regular computer, but the two thieves are still on the loose in the school. They decide to escape through the locker room, and they enter the room just as Flash Thompson wakes up after being knocked out. As he's getting dressed, Flash ends up unintentionally knocking out the two thieves. So there's a lot of knockouts in this issue, and it's pretty funny to see actually. Then the rest of the class enters the locker room and observes the two knocked out criminals. They praise Flash for defeating two criminals all on his own. Of course, Flash takes credit for this by claiming he beat the two thieves in a real fight. And Peter uses this opportunity to suggest that Flash is actually Spider-Man. That would explain why he wasn't there when Spider-Man fought the Living Brain, and it would explain how Flash defeated the two thieves so easily. Peter is pretty happy with his little prank, and he's also satisfied that he now has an excuse to avoid revealing the Living Brain's answer to the class regarding who Spider-Man is. Peter decides he'll just tell the class he lost the paper in all the commotion from the Living Brain's rampage in the school. And for those of you wondering when the Human Torch will show up, that comes in the second story of this issue. While Spider-Man is swinging around the city, he decides to visit Doris Evans' house, who is the Human Torch's girlfriend. He's just trying to get on the Human Torch's nerves by showing off to Doris Evans and trying to convince her that she'd be happier by dating Spider-Man. But when he arrives at her house, Spider-Man sees that she's throwing a party, and Jonny Storm, aka the Human Torch, has just arrived in his new car. It's really cool to see the contrast between Spider-Man and the Human Torch's lifestyles. Jonny Storm goes to parties, drives nice cars, and all the girls love him, and the press idolizes the Human Torch. But Peter Parker doesn't have many friends, doesn't have a car. He's only just beginning to become friendly with two girls, Betty Brant and Liz Allen, and the media doesn't trust him. But like you saw, Spider-Man spins a bat out of webs to disrupt the party, and then he barges in, much to the distaste of Jonny Storm. So Jonny flames on and chases Spider-Man around while shooting fire at him. The fight is going pretty well for Spider-Man, and he uses sand to douse the Human Torch's flame. But that just makes the Human Torch more angry, and he starts shooting more fire at Spider-Man, who barely manages to evade all the flames. Then he comes face to face with the remaining members of the Fantastic Four, who offer to help Spider-Man and break up the fight between him and the Human Torch. But Spider-Man doesn't want their help, and he gets into it with Mr. Fantastic. Then Spider-Man shifts his focus to the Thing. Just before Spider-Man really begins fighting the Thing, the Invisible Woman takes Spider-Man down and ends the fight. And she kind of likes Spider-Man, so Spidey listens to her and leaves the Human Torch alone. But first, he claims that the Fantastic Four are all overrated except for the Invisible Woman, who he spins a heart out of his web fluid for. And that's where the issue ends. The highlight for me was the fight between Peter and Flash. I find Peter's personal life to be so fun, and I often enjoy it even more than his fights as Spider-Man. The Living Brain was an interesting villain in this issue, yet not the most intriguing. But the story with Spider-Man and the Human Torch was funny and entertaining, so I'm going to give this issue a 7 out of 10. What did you think of the issue? Do you think that the Living Brain actually figured out Spider-Man's true identity when Peter's class asked who Spider-Man is? And what was your favorite part of the issue? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you want, throw your thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home down there too. I can't wait to hear it. Follow the link in the description to my Twitter page and follow me on there for more frequent Mixed Marvel Arts updates. And if you want to see more videos like this one, then hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.